Before we ever stepped into a field, before a single shovel hit the dirt, we needed to understand the science behind it all. Not the sales pitch, not the product label, biology. That's why our first stop was Saskatoon. To sit down with Kevin White, CropAid's head microbiologist, and ask one simple question: what's actually happening in the soil? Kevin's story starts decades before CropAid, back when soil biology wasn't even part of the conversation.
I ended up working at Cargill for 6 years, like fertilizer and chemical sales. Nothing really to do with soil microbiology. We'd look at soil samples, but nobody was thinking about soil microbiology at the time. I had a professor I took a microbiology class from in 1987. He wrote an article about this very thing. He said, this is coming. This is going to be the future, where we're stimulating the microbiology of the soil, because that microbiology has such a positive influence on plants. How do you stimulate the biology in the soil? You have to use some chemical, like ammonium lignin sulfate. That's what we use. So the whole idea of that article was being able to develop these soil amendments to get that biology going. Ammonium lignin sulfate is a byproduct of the pulp and paper industry. Somebody finally did the research and found that it will stimulate the microbiology because it's a carbon source, right? It's just ammonium lignin sulfate is just sheets of carbon atoms. When you put it into soil, it stimulates the native biology that's already there, but it's dormant the way we farm, right? It gets that native biology to activate and start interacting with the roots of the crops that you're growing. That microbiology detects that carbon in the soil and says, hey, we've got a carbon source here. Let's start multiplying and interacting with the roots of the plants. It increases the native biology. They did a study in whatever greenhouse they're using. It stimulated the biology and increased it 325 times over, not using any crop A plus on the control.
If soil biology is the future, the real question becomes, how do you turn it back on? Because most fields aren't empty, they're dormant. And that's where stimulation comes in. But waking biology up is only half the story. To understand why it shuts down in the first place, you have to look at what modern farming leaves behind. And a lot of it comes down to salt.
The way we farm, everything's salty. The salt index of urea is 100. Glyphosate's a salt. You look at the chemistry of all these chemicals and fertilizer, it's salt. When you put salt on soil, it tends to kill the biology. When they were coming over in the 1600s and 1700s to North America from England, how did they preserve their meat? They salted. The cell needs water to run its biochemistry. So salt has an osmotic effect. It draws water to it. So the biology backs off. It's not a friendly environment. Same thing in the saline, just preserving the meat. You're putting a preservative on that soil. It doesn't kill all of it, but it backs off. And you need that biology in the soil to convert the fertilizer you're putting down into plant available forms. So you're spending all this money on fertilizer, and not all of it's being converted into plant available forms because the biology is backed off. And we found that the nutrient use efficiency of having that biology ramped up in the soil goes up. You can see those trials on our website. We do them at Lakeland College. You've got more biology in the soil converting the fertilizer you're putting down into plant available forms. That's nutrient use efficiency. That's what that microbiology does. It's probably the most important part of your field.
When biology backs off, something else breaks too. Fertilizer still goes on the field, but less of it ever makes it into the plant. That's nutrient use efficiency. Once nutrients become available, the system comes alive. Roots don't just absorb from the soil, they communicate with it. And the relationship between plants and microbes is far more active than most people realize.
When you put urea down, urea's got to get converted into nitrate, and then into nitrate. Nitrate is the plant available form to use as a nitrogen source. The way urea gets broken down, there's an enzyme in the soil called urease. That urease is produced by microbiology. If you don't have a lot of microbiology in the soil, you're not going to have a lot of urease in the soil. You're not going to get all of that urea broken down and converted into nitrate. Organic matter is composed of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, phosphate, right? Those 4 or 5 elements that are essential for life. When you get the microbiology ramped up in the soil and you start dealing with compaction, which is a major issue, and you start breaking that soil up, you'll find that life is going to start coming back into that soil, right? So the earthworms are going to come back, the protists are going to come back, the nematodes, all sorts of micro and macro fauna. And they're all preying on each other. And the nutrient cycling starts going, right? You start getting trash broken down. And as you get things feeding on each other and trash broken down, that all contributes to organic matter in the soil. You create that humus, that nice peaty kind of soil. That's how life transforms a hard, compacted soil into something that's living. And then all of that microbiology and other life in there, what they do is provide ecosystem services to those plants. They're supplying those plants with nutrients. There's a major fungus in the soil, arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. And that fungi, the mycelium of that fungi, interact with the roots of the plants. So now you've got this network of plant roots and fungi, mycelium, exploring the soil for water and nutrients, right? It acts as an extension of the root system. So you end up with a healthier plant. That plant is being fed the nutrients it's looking for. It's dripping exudates into the soil, feeding the fungi, and the fungi, in return, are feeding the plants. 50% of the phos uptake a plant needs comes from fungi. Bacteria do the same thing. Bacteria will colonize the end of a root. The root is dripping exudates into the soil and attracting microbes. Those microbes congregate around the tip of that root and along the side of it. And they'll actually supply that root with nutrients. They go out into the soil, grab what the plant's looking for, and bring it back. The plant is actually farming microbes. It's dripping carbohydrates, organic acids, vitamins, amino acids. Microbes take those chemical compounds, reproduce, go into the soil, bring nutrients back for the plant. The plant keeps dripping exudates in the soil, farming those microbes. When you get the nutrient cycle going, any ecosystem you look at on the planet, all the nutrients just cycle through. Ecosystems know how to maintain themselves. The same thing happens in that quarter, that 160 acres. It's just an ecosystem. When you get all that life going again, Mother Nature takes care of stuff. So when those microbes are interacting with the roots of those plants, at least 1,000 genes get turned on. So there's a symbiotic relationship there. When the microbiology is interacting with those plants, at least 1,000 of them get turned on. And those genes have various functions in that plant. One of them is disease resistance, right?
All of this sounds complex, even abstract. So the next question is obvious. Can you actually see this happening? Kevin says yes. You just need a shovel and a side-by-side comparison.
You take a sample from a non-crop aid plus treated field, and a sample from a crop aid plus treated field, right? And you put the crop aid plus treatment on the right-hand side of the tailgate and the non-treated side on the left-hand side of the tailgate, right? And then you start looking for differences. So you're looking for differences in the soil. You're looking for differences in the roots, in the root mass. You're looking for differences in tissue mass, right? Plant mass. You're looking for differences in disease. non-plus side has disease, the plus side may have lower incidence of the disease or no disease at all, right? There's always a difference. You're looking for these differences. And I've had guys at Brandon Ag Days come up to me and say, how do I know that your stuff is going to work? Well, we'll come out and show you. Why? What has been your experience? Well, I bought this stuff from one of your competitors, put it on, and I had no idea if it's working because nobody's come out to check. There's no follow-up with service. And that's a hallmark of what we do, right? We provide that customer service. We show you that it's working. We show you the differences in the soil. We show you the differences in the plants. It's not, and I've heard this term before, snake oil, right? It's actually working. I've done videos when I'm out with a farmer on the tailgate of my truck, and I've got rock hard compacted soil on the left-hand side of the tailgate. I'll put it in the air 2 feet and I'll drop it on the tailgate and it goes thunk. And then on the right-hand side with the Crop Aid Plus treated soil, it's broken up in your hands. It's pliable. There's structure to it. The soil structure is starting to come back. You can drop it in. It's not compact. So that's the biggest difference that I see in a compacted soil. So one crop check that I did last year. So one of our customers, this was the first year, it was on a canola field. And their neighbor had a canola field right across the road, right? I don't think it was the same variety. It was planted the same date. So in my customer's field, went in, shovel goes into the soil, nice, comes up, starting to break up. You can see that the microbiology is starting to break that soil up. Went across the road 10 feet into the neighbor's canola field, and I couldn't get the shovel into the soil. I gave it to the producer. I said, here, you try it, right? It was a parking lot. You could have taken that canola out of there, painted it black, put yellow lines on it. That's how hard it was. It was like cement. That's the difference that the microbiology makes in the soil. And I keep going over and I keep coming back to that over and over and over again. But that microbiology makes a huge difference to the structure of that soil and the nutrition of those plants. It's huge. You take a sample from a non-Crop Aid Plus treated field, a sample from a Crop Aid Plus treated field, right? And you put the Crop Aid Plus treatment on the right-hand side of the tailgate and the non-treated side on the left-hand side of the tailgate, right? And then you start looking for differences. So you're looking for differences in the soil. You're looking for differences in the roots, in the root mass. You're looking for differences in tissue, plant mass. You're looking for differences in disease. The non-plus side has disease, the plus side may have lower incidence of the disease or no disease at all, right? There's always a difference. You're looking for these differences. And I've had guys at Brandon Ag Days come up to me and say, how do I know that your stuff is going to work? Well, we'll come out and show you. Why? What has been your experience? Well, I bought this stuff from one of your competitors, put it on, and I had no idea if it's working because nobody's come out to check. There's no follow-up with service. And that's a hallmark of what we do, right? We provide that customer service. We show you that it's working. We show you the differences in the soil. We show you the differences in the plants. It's not, and I've heard this term before, snake oil, right? It's actually working. In the nutrition of those plants. It's huge.
When you start seeing real differences in the soil, it changes how you think about farming. It stops being just about yield this year and starts becoming about stewardship. The challenge is that modern agriculture wasn't built around biology. It was built around prescriptions, inputs, and short-term fixes. So the question isn't whether change is needed, It's whether we're willing to rethink the system.
Governments are starting to recognize that soil is a strategic asset. If your soils get degraded to the point where you can't produce food, that's not good for your civilization. Food security is huge. It's a national security matter. I think lots of guys are starting to wake up to the fact that something needs to be done about the soil. You and I are here for 70, 80 years, but there's obviously people coming after us who need to use that soil to produce food. I think we have an obligation to leave the planet in better shape than we found it.
This season on Shovel Kings, we'll see what happens when biology comes back into the picture. Not in theory, but in real fields with real farmers. This is where the science meets the soil.